about now? All right. All right, let's open up with prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for allowing us all to make it here safely. We thank you for your Shabbat and the time to rest and reflect and to come together in fellowship and worship to you. And we pray that you would bless this day, that you would continue to bless this day and bring your spirit here with us today as we worship and honor you with this service. I pray that you would bless this service, that it would be, it would magnify your glory, and that everything we do would honor you for who you are, and that we would each grow closer to you today. Again, thank you for this time. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. All right, please stand for the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Yahovah Eloheinu, Yahovah Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod, Malkuto, Leolam Vayed. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Blessed be the name of his glorious kingdom forever and ever. All right, and today, Olivia was going to lead the Vav Ta for us today. Yeah, we're definitely going to do it. You going to just stay right there, though?
You want me to, or you?
It's up to you.
I can just do it loud.
Oh, you need a mic? That's what Sarah said. You need a mic.
Vahavta et Yahuwah Elohecha b'chol levacha uv'kol nafshecha uv'kol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi matzavcha hayom alavevecha v'shinatam lavanecha v'dibartam bam b'shintecha bevtecha uletdecha vader u'shat b'cha uv'komecha u'shartam leo aliadecha v'hayu l'todofot beinenecha Uchtatam al mezuzot beitecha uvisha'cha. Okay, and you shall love Yahuwah your Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And have these words which I command you this day be upon your heart. And you shall teach them diligently to your children, and speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you retire, and when you arise. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and let them be frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. V'havta lerecha chamocha, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself.
Blessing over the children. Yahavah bless you and keep you. Yahavah cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahavah turn his face toward you and give you peace. For the daughters, blessed are you of Yahavah, my daughter, for you have been kind and generous. Yahavah is your Elohim, and his people are your people. May all people know of certainty that you are a virtuous daughter. For the sons, may Yahavah make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. May you be a man after Yahavah's own heart. May you be bold and courageous, leading everyone under your influence in the ways of Yahavah.
And for both, may your mouth speak with wisdom, may your heart meditate with reverence. May your hands do the work Elohim has given you. May your feet hasten to follow the path that Yahovah has laid out for your life. May your entire life be fruitful. May Yahovah's full will for you be accomplished in your life. May the spirit of Yahovah, the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and power, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of Yahovah be upon you. May the grace of Yeshua HaMashiach, the love of Elohim, and the fellowship of Ruach HaKodesh be upon
Shabbat Shalom. I got to say it every time I come up to the mic, you know. Sabbath rest. Much needed. Give me just 1 second. I know I have the book of Job somewhere in my scriptures. There we go. So, Job 25 and 26. They're small, don't worry. Real small. Bildad the Shukai said, dominion and fear belong to him. He makes peace in his high places. Can his armies be numbered? On whom does his light not shine? How then can humans be righteous with God? How can those born of women be clean? Why, before him even the moon lacks brightness, and the stars themselves are not pure. How much less a human who is merely a maggot, a mortal who is only a worm? Then Job replied, what great help you bring to the powerless. What deliverance to the arm without strength. Such wonderful advice for man lacking wisdom. So much common sense you've expressed. Who helped you say these words? Whose spirit is it coming forth from you? The ghost of the dead tremble beneath the water with its creatures. Sheol is naked before him. Abaddon lies uncovered. He stretches the north over chaos and suspends the earth on nothing. He binds up the water in his thick clouds, yet no cloud is torn apart by it. He shuts off the view of his throne by spreading his cloud across it. He fixed a circle on the surface of the water, defining the boundary between light and dark. The pillars of heaven tremble, aghast at his rebuke. He stirs up the sea with his power, and by his skill he strikes down Rahav. With his spirit he spreads the heavens, his hand pierces the fleeing serpent. And these are but the fringes of his ways. How faint the echo we hear of him, but who is able to grasp the meaning of his thundering power? Job is getting it. Just leave you with that. He's getting it.
Remember to turn my guitar up this week. I said, remember to turn the volume up on my guitar this week.
Who is like him, the lion and the lamb, seated on the throne? Mountains bow down, every ocean roars to the Lord of hosts. Who is like him, the lion and the lamb, seated on the throne? Mountains bow down, every ocean roars to the Lord of hosts. Praise Adonai, from the rising of the sun to the end of every day. Praise Adonai, all the nations of the earth, all the angels and the saints sing praise. Who is like him, the lion and the lamb, seated on the throne? Mountains bow down, every ocean roars to the Lord of hosts. Who is like him, the lion and the lamb, seated on the throne? Mountains bow down, and every ocean roars to the Lord of hosts. Praise Adonai, from the rising of the sun to the end of every day. All the nations of the earth, all the angels and the saints sing praise. Elohim Adonai Sebaos, Ezra Betzarot, Nimsameod. 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 Adonai Savot Imanu, Miskavanu, Elohei Yaakov, Selah, Selah. Adonai Savot Imanu, Miskavanu, Elohei Yaakov, Selah, Selah, Selah. Elohim Adonai Sebaos, Ezra Betzarot, Nimsameod. Elohim Adonai Sebaos, Ezra Betzarot, Nimsameod. Adonai Savot Imanu, Miskavanu, Elohei Yaakov, Selah, Selah. Adonai Savot Imanu, Miskavanu, Elohei Yaakov, Selah, Selah. Adonai Savot Imanu, Miskavanu, Elohei Yaakov, Selah, Selah, Selah. Sebaos, Ezra Betzarot, Nimsameod. Elohim Adonai Sebaos, Ezra Betzarot, Nimsameod. Elohim Adonai Sebaos, Ezra Betzarot, Nimsameod. Elohim Adonai Sebaos, Ezra Betzarot, Nimsameod. Ezra Betzarot, Nimsameod. Ezra Betzarot, Nimsameod. Well, I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whispers of love in the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Well, I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know we're all searching for answers. Only you provide, 'cause you know just call me, deeper still as you call me, deeper still as you call me, deeper still as you love, love, love. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Oh, you're perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. There is no God like the God of Israel. Eternal One, my ever-present help. Your praise goes on forever. Your praise goes on forever. You are the one who beautifies my days. With faithful love, you meet me face to face.
just thank you, Lord, for everything you are and everything you do for us. And thank you for your son, Yeshua, and his sacrifice for us. We praise your name, Lord, and we thank you for this time of worship and fellowship, and we thank you for the Bible study that we're about to have, and thank you. And we ask that you would speak to us through the words that we read on the page, and that you would touch our souls today. It's in Yeshua's name we ask, amen.
song?
Yeah. No, you don't want this one.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello, hello. Good to go? All right. It still might be too loud in the room. And be sure to turn the room mic up on the online too. Even though I told Nolan he can't talk today. How is everybody? Shabbat Shalom. I see, told you every time I get to the microphone. You okay, Avery? You look a little tired. You all here by yourself? Leah's not here this morning. Woo! Should I wait for our guest? Play another music video?
Yes.
Play rock fist. Put up your rock fist. You feel it when I drop this. See, I can do it all by myself. I don't even need the video. Bleach my hair? Yeah. I know, it would have been a surprise. That's why I'm wearing it. All right, so yeah, I'll get started. Of course, like I said, I would play songs that impacted me at some point in time. I was thinking about Shout to the Lord. We talked about it a little bit last week. I said it's a testimony song. It's really hard for me to talk about it because every time I do, I cry. Even though I cry up here for some reason, one way or another, anyways. But the last time that Shout to the Lord was like, it was like a significant thing. Isn't it funny, though? Here I am. I'm standing before you, and we're talking about how the thing that completely changed my life was Shout to the Lord. And me and Jared are going to do a video about sacred name and using the name of God. And I'm going to tell you, I lean in the direction of, I would rather say Elohim or God or Yehovah than I would Lord. Not that I think that there's anything wrong with Lord. But here I am also telling you that the song that changed my whole entire life, I mean significantly, definitely would rub a lot of us, including myself possibly, Hebrew root folks, the wrong way. Too common in its vernacular. But regardless, at the moment, I knew for a fact that song was talking about the one true God. At least it was definitely the one true God, as I saw it, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Shout to the Lord. Changed my life. And on the Sunday that all went down, the last time, God arresting me, grabbing me by the nape of my neck, like I told you guys. And grabbing me by the nape of my neck and shaking me was also that same morning. We walked in late. I want to get it right and not be a slobbery mess. We walked in late to church, and they stopped at one song, started singing Shout to the Lord. She'll tell you, I fell apart like pool of, yep. And then, if I wasn't already bad enough as it was, all messed up and couldn't even breathe, and she's freaking out, like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I don't know. Turn that room mic up. Make sure you can hear. First time going to church, she was so embarrassed. I'm sitting here, pool of mess. Now, granted, she had seen this literally just a month before this at the church I grew up in, the Assembly of God's church that I'd gone, was brought home from the hospital to, literally the property. Can't do it. All right. So, anyways, same song came on there, which, by the way, was the first Sunday they ever didn't sing out of a hymnal. And my grandfather put the screen up. I was like, here we go. Even this old church is doing Jesus karaoke like all these other churches are. I was being negative, and I was looking down on them. But anyways, the very first song they played ever out of the hymnals at the church I was brought home from the hospital to, Shout to the Lord. So you can see where this goes, right? Very first song we hear as we come to this church, that the story is crazy, how I treated the wife that morning. We were late all because of me, because we had been at a party the night before. We were late because I was inviting her going to church, and I got up and went anyways. Very first song, like as they were ending one, we're walking into the very first song being Shout to the Lord. So here I am, I'm this pool of mess, I'm tears. Like I said last week, right, something diligent was happening in the background in my life. And then the youth gets up and they start doing Youth of the Nation. And POD crossed boundaries even into my worldly life. And I was like, what's going on? I'm like crying, falling on the ground. She's like, get up, oh my gosh. No, it wasn't that bad. But it was bad. It was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. And at one point, I'm looking at her as the pastor's preaching. Very, very key message, by the way, guys. Transformation, not confirmation. And you'll hear me say it time and time again. Transformation, not confirmation. He was preaching the title of his message. And I'm literally looking at her going, is he talking to me? And she's like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with you? Yeah, needless to say, there's a lot more to that. God was getting a hold of me. And there you go, POD, Youth of the Nation. Made me even much of a babbling, crying, scare my wife mess that morning. Much like I'm.
I got used to it real quick. I think we all have.
Oh. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the support. Very supportive group. All right, so, hey, here we are. I don't get to ask, what about Ruth? Hey, now how about Ruth, right? That's the title of the message today, right? Because we're going to go through the whole book of Ruth now. I'm not going to read the whole book of Ruth. We're just, you should read the whole book of Ruth. It's part of our reading plan. But we're going to read some of it. We're going to talk about some of it. And we get to rehash some things we've talked about before. Hey, Ruth is the lineage of the Messiah, Yeshua. Or if you're not a believer in Yeshua and you're a Jew, she is the great-great-grandmother, right? Is that right? Great-great-grandmother of David, King David, who you believe the Messiah lineage is going to come from, no matter which group you belong to or who you're part of. She's a very important lady. Let's just put it that way. And there's some really interesting things that, when you read Ruth and then you go away for, a year, 2 years, you don't come back and read it again. There's actually, this is my fault for all the talk I've been doing when I've been like, and don't forget, what about Ruth, right? Don't forget. What am I saying when I say don't forget when I'm talking about Ruth, right? Identification, who you identify as is the most important part, all right? Identification is the key, okay? And with Ruth, that's the key. A forbidden people who chooses to identify as the people of God, right? So, overcoming her birth, so to speak, quote unquote, the kind of people she was born to. And then, as you see here in demonstration, I'm wearing my skull cap for all of you. I'm not here trying to look like Jonathan. Where is he at? Where's Jonathan at? Is he here? Where's he at? Not here? Okay, big kippah, right? It is in demonstration of unauthorized coverings. What are they and what are they not? And as you see here, I got my dunce hat for all of us who want to, be dumb about it. Sorry, shouldn't have said that. I'll be sensitive. I am actually sensitive about this subject, but we'll get there. All right. Oh, also, side note, after all the, testimony, teary-eyed mess that I usually am, I don't know what I was thinking about these videos and songs. But anyways, I also have been feeling really under the weather this week. Been tested. It wasn't COVID. Wasn't the flu. At least not by the time I went and got tested, which was probably too late anyways. So, yeah, I'm going to be a little chill, try to be. And I might get to the point where I'm kind of like, all right, guys, we're wrapping this up. And it's not because I don't want to talk. It's just because I'm getting tired, to be honest with you. But, yeah. So if you're wondering, like, what's wrong with him? Is he upset? Nope, just sleepy. And that's also why I'm sitting down. That's why I'm sitting down, okay? So, yeah. I'm good, though. I'm getting better. All right. The hospitality of Abraham. Genesis chapter 18. So, Genesis chapter 18, probably one of the most significant cultural biblical passages, and that's the reason why I put this hospitality of Abraham phrase as a bullet, and why I chose to spend a little bit of time on it. We're going to park on it for just a second. But if you know anything about or have ever visited Arab countries, especially definitely those that are heavily Muslim, you will learn real quick, and I have family members and I have other people that I've known. I have never personally experienced it. You will learn real quick, real fast, that our image sometimes of planes flying into buildings in New York and terrorists with bombs strapped to them is not what you will actually experience if you go over to certain areas of the Middle East. As a matter of fact, you can be in certain places, especially with more Bedouin or village type areas, you could be a flag flying Christian, which I know one specifically who has experienced this, and you will receive, regardless of how they feel about what you're doing, in some places, in some cases, the hospitality of Abraham. And that's how they describe it. If you ask, why are you literally killing the fatted calf for me and doing all this hubbub inside your tent? Believe it or not, it's as ancient today in some places as it is in the Bible story, in the scriptures. You will find them saying, this is the hospitality of Abraham. And they'll literally tell you that's what it is. That part of the very culture over in the Middle East as a whole, you can see the evidence of this story here, that different groups of people, some even argue predates Islamic culture or the Quran, goes way, way back. It's passed down from family member to family member. And that is this place where Abraham sees these three men, and he goes out to them. He goes out to them, and he begs them to, he begs them to stay so that he can go and provide for them food. And he doesn't just provide for them bread and water for their feet, like he said, bread to eat and water for their feet, but he gives them an entire feast, right? Scripture in all the different texts and translation even mentions curds and milk and the calf he was preparing. So he basically, gives to these three men a lot. Now, with that all being said, how cool, is the hospitality of Abraham? How much of a thing is it that it is practiced in cultures today? You see that we have, even in the beginning here, it actually is maybe more significant than that. Not taking anything away from the coolness or the hospitality aspect, or saying, hey, we should be as hospitable as Abraham was all the time in our own lives to others, no matter how much we don't like them or think that they're weird or something. There's a moment and a space for hospitality, right? I'm not saying acceptance, and I'm not saying inviting to live in your home, all right? And I know I could be telling you to be hospitable to non-angel-like beings from heaven, okay? Which is what we're dealing with here in chapter 18. But I'm just saying, in general, maybe there's something to take away from this big, huge idea of Middle Eastern culture called the hospitality of Abraham. But really, where we're at in Genesis chapter 18 is that it starts out with, very, very first verse, Yehovah appeared to him. Yehovah appeared to Abraham. Actually, it says to Abraham himself, right? By the oaks of Mamre, he sat at the entrance to the tent during the heat of day. He raised his eyes and looked, and there in front of him stood three men. On seeing them, he ran from the tent door to meet them, prostrated himself on the ground, and said, "My Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, please don't leave your servant. Please let me send for some water so that you can wash your feet, then rest under the tree, and I will bring a piece of bread." And then you go on, and like I said, he does a whole lot more than some water for their feet and bread to eat. And he gets very hospitable. A very key piece to this is, I shouldn't say key, because that sounds like I'm acting like I know something. The language and the description that you see here, again, we find him speaking to these three men And is he speaking to one of them specifically like he is God? Because multiple places we find that the conversation is being had. He's talking to these men. And these men, right? So if you look here, they said to him, the three, okay, where is Sarah, your wife? He said, there in the tent. He said, I will certainly return to you around this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Sarah heard him from the entrance of the tent behind him. Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed. Does anybody remember what Isaac's name is supposed to be? What does it mean? It means laughter, right? She laughed to herself, thinking, I am old, and so is my Lord. Am I to have pleasure again? Yehovah said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and ask? So again, Yehovah said to Abraham, why? He's sitting with these three men, and they're asking him, they ask him, where's Sarah? They have this conversation. He hears Sarah laugh. And then Yehovah said to Abraham, why is Sarah laughing? All right. That's why I said key. I shouldn't say key because I don't have the key, but it is a point, a very important point, that somewhere in the midst of these three men, and somewhere in the midst of this conversation, this hospitality, and this Yehovah saying specifically, no, Sarah's going to have a child. Yehovah said to Abraham, Yehovah's there. And Abraham is entertaining Yehovah, God, the Father, angels, Yeshua in the Old Testament, right? Yes, I don't know, but it's there. Three men, Yehovah, interchangeably. It's all happening in this exchange and in this conversation. Cool part about it, all right? Real cool part about it is 13. Verse 13, and Yehovah said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Right, I just read that. Saying, shall I indeed bear a child when I am so old? I want you to take note of something because it's going to be important here later on, right? The parentheses, right? Shall I indeed bear a child when I am so old? Whenever that happens, that's the NSAB. Normally, if you read it on the computer, it's in italics, okay? This is just, italics transfers over to what's in the parentheses. So in essence, this is them saying, hey, we put this word, a child, right? Shall I indeed bear? Because the text doesn't actually say it, but they put it there because they believe textual clues tend to lead them in the direction that it should say, I shall bear a child. Just to keep that in note, because at times it can be very important when you're reading the King James and the NASB. When I am so old, and then, so this is Yehovah copying Sarah. When he says this, Sarah laughing, saying, shall I indeed bear a child? And then Yehovah himself is saying, or the three men, one of them, is anything too difficult for Yehovah? At the appointed time, I will return to you at this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. So repeats himself. Sarah denied it, however, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. Yeah, I'm going to be afraid too, right? Like, these angelic presence beings, if Yehovah's there in any shape, form, or fashion, you feel it. Okay? Definitely. Guaranteed. And he said, but you did laugh. Right? So interesting exchange. Right? You did laugh. You absolutely laughed. Then the men rose up from there and looked down toward Sodom, and Abraham was walking with them to send them off. Okay? Too difficult. Notice what I have up here on the title of the slide. Could also be translated as too wonderful. Is anything too wonderful for Yehovah? Right? Is anything too wonderful? Is anything too difficult? Is anything too wonderful? Right? Say it again. Too difficult? Too wonderful? Nah, I don't think so. And I think Yehovah is saying that right there himself. He's like, really? You don't think I can make this happen? Now, before we do what we do and judge Sarah, let's just think about this for a second. Okay? She's well in age, well past childbearing age. Now, for us, we're like, biologically speaking, who knows? Maybe back then, childbearing age wasn't as close to what it is today. I don't know, right? I'm not trying to say that one way or the other. Regardless, she knew it. Abraham knew it well past. Okay? So here they are, well past, not even normal, natural, anything else you could speak of for her to have a child. And Yehovah saying you're going to, right? Put yourself in her shoes. Walk a mile, just a second, regardless of how cool this moment is, how much you feel the presence of God. Look, would it be easy for you to believe? I doubt it. I'm saying that for myself, at least, at a minimum, right? I think I would have some doubt, too, right? My grandma came to me and said, I'm having a baby, and God said I was having a baby, which, by the way, this has happened. I don't have exact stories. I didn't take the time because, like I said, I wasn't feeling too well this week to find these stories. There are stories out there where women have been told they were going to bear a child at really old ages, and they have done so, especially within the congregation of believers in God. Anyways, miraculous things are recorded besides right here. My point is, don't be too quick to judge Sarah, okay? Now, interesting, very, very, very interesting exchange takes place. So, we have Sarah. She's going to have a baby. You laughing at me? You're going to have a baby. All right, we get that exchange with God. Yeah, I wasn't laughing. It wasn't me, right? You did laugh. It's okay, right? You know, you're going to have a baby. All right? So, now we get to the next exchange. And this is Abraham. Yes. She's 90 because Abraham 99. That's right. Thank you. I just trying to figure out where. I don't know if it says it right here.
It is 17.
17? Okay.
In chapter 7.
Somewhere. It definitely says it. I know.
Yeah, it's chapter 17, verse 24. Abraham was 99 years old. That's when he was like circumcised and everything, and then it goes in, so that's going into chapter 18. Abraham is 99 years old.
Yeah, Abraham's 99, but it does say Sarah too.
And Sarah in verse 17, when God spoke to Abraham and Abraham was 90, at that time, no, Sarah who is 90 years
90.
old.
There you go. Birth at 90. Yep. Well, Sarah gave birth to 90. Thank you. Good. Good. So it does. Yes. There you go. So here we are. Yeah, she's real old. Even if biological timelines are shifted because of how ancient this is, right? No matter what, she's old. Okay. So Genesis 18 through 16 through 33. The men set out from there and looked over towards Sodom. So remember, we just left. They're looking, I just read that. They're looking over towards Sodom. And Abraham went with them to see them on their way. Yehovah said, all right, here we go again. They're leaving, the men, and Yehovah specifically is speaking to Abraham. Should I hide, or specifically speaking to himself first, then he speaks to Abraham. I jumped the gun, excuse me. Should I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? And as much as Abraham is sure to become a great and strong nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed by him. For I have made myself known to him, so that he will give orders to his children and to his household after him, to keep the way of Yehovah and to do what is right and just, so that Yehovah may bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. Yehovah said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, their sin so serious, that I will now go down, and see whether their deeds warrant the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. The men turned away from there and went towards Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before Yehovah. Okay, so the three men, Yehovah, it says they, doesn't tell me how many men, was one left behind, two go, I don't know. Don't get mad at me, I don't know. But there's something here in the fact that the men go, all right? I believe we find later on, and we will later on, that it's two of them, okay? And Yehovah stays with Abraham. Abraham approached and said, will you actually sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Maybe there are 50 righteous people in the city. Will you actually sweep the place away and not forgive for the sake of 50 righteous who are there? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous along with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked are treated alike. Far be it from you. Shouldn't the judge of all earth do what is just? Yehovah said, if I find in Sodom 50 who are righteous, then I will forgive the whole place for their sake. How far do they go? How far do they go back and forth before Abraham's willing to just be quiet? 10. Thank you, Nolan. 10. 10. He says, if there's 10 righteous in Sodom, I will not destroy them. All right? And then it ends with, for the sake of 10, I won't destroy it. Yehovah went on his way as soon as he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. And then that's where we get the next verse, next chapter. The two angels came to Sodom that evening. All right? But remember, Yehovah said he wanted to see for himself. So when we say these two angels, these messengers, is that like Yehovah seeing for himself when they go in? We'll get there next week. We'll talk more about it next week. But for 10, Yehovah would have spared Sodom.
10 is a community.
Okay?
Church.
Sure.
He only had 5, 3, 4, 5. He didn't have 10. We have more than 10 here today.
We do. We do have more than 10. So, the interesting piece about this is that Abraham gets to have the back and forth with Yehovah, right? And we see this again later on with Moses. So let me ask you a question. Would you feel inappropriate in having those kind of conversations during your prayer time? You know, especially if you feel the Holy Spirit speaking to you. You feel like, and I'm not talking like the audible voice, but I'm talking like you hear, right? I've been challenged before in the past where I've heard, you know, somebody has preached this message and said, like, look what they did, you know. Later on we'll find, and there's all kinds of stuff we'll talk about, right? But Jacob wrestles with an angel of the Lord, right? Yehovah. It says he's wrestled with God and with man, right? Where sometimes I've heard the righteous and the religious, or the religious righteous. I don't know how you would like to say that, but they would especially because of where I came from. And I'm going to say where I came from is not correct 100%, if not 70%. But they would be like, how dare you speak to God that way? I'm like, whoa, because Moses dared, and so did Abraham. I was saying that when I was like 12 years old, by the way. I was a little bit of a smart aleck back then, and definitely way, way ahead in the clouds. Probably why I ended up rebelling. But anyways, point is, right, I don't think it's wrong. I think we want to take this in a balanced approach, and I think it's all about the heart issue, right? You know, if you're being foolish, Yehovah's going to see that you're being foolish. But if you're being genuine and you're truly crying out and you're truly asking for, the 10, save the city, don't blow it up. Don't blow it up. Don't turn it into a salt mine. I was going to put some pictures up here of the modern day Sodom and Gomorrah. We're not there yet. We'll get there. Don't turn it into a salt mine, right? But at the same time, I don't think you're wrong for beseeching the Father, especially in a personal one-on-one moment in your prayer time. Just be careful about it. Balanced approach. But I do believe Abraham, Moses, right? For your own sake, for your own family, this back and forth is, I wouldn't say an example, but it is just a picture of. Now, granted, what have I been saying so far up to this point in Genesis chapter 18? We're talking about a physical presence, okay? And we're talking about a one-on-one conversation and a man, the likeness of a man, right, standing before Abraham, okay? So there's your balance too, right? In your prayer closet, you were told how to pray by Yeshua himself. So that's the best example. But I still think it's awesome that here and later on, Moses and Abraham beseech the Father, and stand in the gap. To use some Christian cliche, they stand in the gap for their fellow humanity, much less family. Yeah, but debating with God. This is where Jews love to use this passage and to be like, see, that's where we get it from. Father Abraham. all of our shrewdness and ability to wheel and deal, and to have business sense. It comes all the way back to Genesis chapter 18, which I think is silly, but anyways, funny nonetheless. Here we are, Ruth. Okay, so story. There's famine in the land, right? Bethlehem is no longer the house of bread because there is no bread. All right, and they have to leave. Now, question remains: were they wrong for going to the land of Moab when Moab was a sworn enemy of the people of God and a forbidden group of folks at this point when we get to the book of Ruth? Doesn't say. Doesn't say one way or the other. But what does happen is that while they're there, they take wives, and all of Naomi's husband and then her sons all die in the land of Moab. Okay? Some could turn that around, first couple of verses of Ruth chapter 1, and be like, yep, it's because that somebody had to pay for this sinful behavior. Okay? I don't go there. I don't know that, so I'm not standing on that, and I can't help but be a positive guy. Bye, guys. Go shore, Nolan. Go shore. No, I'm gonna miss you. Yeah. Duty calls. So I've never specifically heard. Did you put it on cool? Yeah. Is it still on 67? It was on heat. Did it? Okay, you're good. Okay. Hey, Brandon, will you make sure to put that one on cool too, please? 68. Oh, well, my bad. Sorry, Jared. I'm just kidding. No problem. All right. So here we are. Book of Ruth. All right. First couple of verses, like I said, is this misery, this sadness, this upsetness with everybody dying. And now Ruth and Naomi are on their own. You see Oprah here. Okay, not the Oprah from TV, but Oprah. I know. I was being funny. Huh?
That's actually what's supposed to be her name, but they misspelled it on our birth certificate.
Oprah? Oh, that's funny. I never heard that before. And they lifted up their voices and wept again because they're all sad. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So already you see here in verse 14, Orpah is getting ready to move out, head out, right? She's kissing her mother-in-law goodbye. Then she said, behold, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. All right? Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or turn back from following you, for where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus may Yehovah do to me, and worse, if anything but death parts you and me. For all the Yod He Vav He tetragrammaton pronunciation talks and
how to say the name. Yehovah is how I say it. Yahweh is how other people say it, right? Yahweh, all these different translations. I wonder, I feel like this was her oath where she actually used the name and said specifically, because it's important for her on the identification piece, to say, nope, not my sister-in-law's gods, not any other gods, but the one. All right? And that's what she says. And she even goes so far as to say, thus may Yehovah do me, and worse, if anything but death parts you and me. So she's sticking with Naomi. She's faithful. All right, now we get to Ruth chapter 2 and chapter 3. And I wanted to read, because this is like what I was saying earlier, in Ruth chapter 2. I really wanted to read it because it's interesting, very interesting. So they return at the end of chapter 1, right? They return back to Bethlehem. That's where they're at. They're back in Bethlehem. And there's food there, and Naomi's all sad, and she's saying, don't call me Naomi, which means pleasant. Call me Mara, which is bitter, because Shaddai has made my life very bitter. I went out full, and Yehovah has brought me back empty, right? She's basically kind of sad. All she's saying is, I got this Moabite, Ruth. No, I'm just kidding. She loves Ruth, but she definitely does not have her husband or her sons. They arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest, right? So that's the end of chapter 1. So here we are in chapter 2. Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a prominent and wealthy member of Elimelech's clan, whose name was Boaz. Ruth, the woman from Moab, said to Naomi, let me go into the field and glean ears of grain behind anyone who will allow me to. So there you go. She's already starting to learn Torah. Okay? She knows she can go out to the field and glean the barley harvest, because that's in the Torah. It's a commandment. Don't cut the corners of your field. Leave it for the widow, the orphan, or the stranger. Okay, so that's what she's doing. Then Boaz, she answered, go, my daughter. So she set out, arrived at the field, and gleaned behind the reapers. She happened to be in the part of the field that belonged to Boaz from Elimelech's clan when Boaz arrived from Bethlehem. He said to the reapers, Yehovah be with you. And they answered him, Yehovah bless you. Then Boaz asked his servant, surprising the reapers, whose girl is this? Who is this in my field? The servant supervising the reapers answered, she's a girl from Moab who returned with Naomi from the plain of Moab. Now notice there. She's a girl from Moab. She returned with Naomi from Moab. She's a Moabite. Right? You see how they already kind of like, And they're right. By the letter of the law, in their viewpoint, they're correct. She said, please let me glean and gather what falls from the sheaves behind the reapers. So she went and has kept at it from morning until now, except for a little rest in the shelter. Boaz said to Ruth, this is the cool part about chapter 2. Did you hear that, my daughter? Don't go to glean in another field. Don't leave this place, but stick here with my working girls. Keep your eyes on whichever field the reapers are working in and follow the girls. I've ordered the young men not to bother you. Whenever you get thirsty, go and drink from the water jars the young men have filled. She fell on her face, prostrating herself, and said to him, why are you showing me such favor? Why are you paying attention to me? After all, I'm only a foreigner. And here's what Boaz says. Boaz answered, I've heard the whole story. I like the JPS translation. I've heard the whole story. Everything you've done for your mother-in-law since your husband died, including how you left your father and mother and the land you were born in to come to a place about whom you knew nothing beforehand. May Yehovah reward you for what you've done. May you be rewarded in full by Yehovah, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. She said, my Lord, I hope and I continue pleasing you. You have comforted and encouraged me, even though I'm not one of your servants. And then he makes her come and sit and eat with him even after that. And then he tells the servants to be sure to leave her more. She goes back and asks her, where did she glean today In verse 19, her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where were you working? Blessed be the one who took such good care of you." She told her mother-in-law with whom she had been working, she said, "The name of the man with whom I was working today is Boaz." Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed by Yehovah, who has never stopped showing grace, neither to the living nor to the dead." Naomi also told her. So here's sad Naomi getting a little bit, some reprieve from her mourning. She's getting happy and having some positive come out of this. Moreover, he even said to me, in verse 21, moreover, he even said to me, "Stay close to my young men until they have finished my harvest." So Naomi's picking up. She's like, "Hey, it's good, my daughter, for you to keep going out with his girls so that you won't encounter hostility in some other field." So she stayed close to Boaz's girls to glean until the end of the barley. Okay, so then you get to this point here where Naomi also, it says, "Hey, look, you need to, this guy, he's our relative. You need to go approach him." And she does. She lays at his feet at night when he's falling asleep after, So, here we are, okay? She went down so her mother-in-law, so what her mother-in-law says, "My daughter, I should be seeking security for you so things will go well with you. Now there, Boaz, our relative, you were with his girls. He's going to be winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. So bathe, anoint yourself, put on your good clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. But don't reveal your presence to the man until he's finished eating and drinking. Then when he lies down, take note of where he's lying. Later, go in, uncover his feet, and lie down. He will tell you what to do." She responded, "I will do everything you tell me." So she's going. Think about the title of my message today, Unauthorized Coverings, right? She is going in an authorized manner in a way, covering herself with his blanket that is at the edge of his feet. He wakes up in the morning, authorized way, my children, authorized covering, a very authorized covering, authorized. Say that one more time. Did you hear me? I don't think he's listening. Authorized covering. We are one big happy family here, all those online. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. Oh, yeah, so anyways, she goes and she does this and says to him, "Put your robe over your handmaid because you are a redeeming kinsman." Again, this is a process that they had for an authorized covering. Okay? And what's going on here is he has to make a sign and a symbol to everyone that his intention is to redeem her. Now he says to her, "Listen, there's a relative that's closer to you than I am. All right? And I have to go to this guy. Okay? And I have to make sure he's not wanting to redeem you. All right? And so I put up here Deuteronomy 25, verses 5 through 10. All right? If you guys remember, not too long ago, or a year ago, I don't remember. It's been a while. Right? We talked about the man with the sandal. Okay? Yeah, the man with the sandal. All right? And so here's 5 through 10 of Deuteronomy. Devarim. If brothers live together and one of them dies childless, his widow is not to marry someone unrelated to him. Her husband's brother is to go to her and to perform the duty of a brother-in-law by marrying her. The first child she bears will succeed it to the name of his dead brother, so that his name will not be eliminated from Israel. If the man does not wish to marry his brother's widow, then his brother's widow is to go up to the gate to the leaders and say, "My brother-in-law refuses to raise up for his brother a name." Did I say his brother's widow? Yeah. Then his brother's widow is to go up to the gate to leaders and say, "My brother-in-law refuses to raise up for his brother a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband's brother for me." The leaders of his town are to summon him and speak to him. If on appearing before them, he continues to say, "I don't want to marry her," then his brother's widow is to approach him in the presence of the leaders, pull his sandal off his foot, spit in his face, and say, "This is what is done to the man who refuses to build up his brother's family." From that time on, his family is to be known in Israel as the family of the man who had his sandal pulled off. Y'all laugh, but this is serious. Let's go back to Ruth. Uh-oh, did I lose my spot? I think I lost my spot. Yes, ma'am.
What if the brother-in-law is married?
Oh, I knew one of you were going to have to ask that question. What'd you say? I hope you had that room mic up. You got that room mic up? You've had it up, right, Matt, this whole time?
I turn it up and down every time because it messes with your mic. So I turn
Don't turn it down. Go ahead.
So, does the man have the option to say no without getting his sandal taken off if he is already married, or no?
But did you just hear what I just read? Nothing.
You not see it.
Also, I was
I didn't know
wrong.
if there was
It was not
any
married.
loophole somewhere,
Boaz.
like, that maybe
Yeah.
said. No, you're fine.
I was saying, I was wrong. I thought that the closer relation to Ruth had been married, and that's why he rejected it, that it was for his inheritance, not.
Right. Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. To why. It shows a little bit of wisdom on Boaz's part. A little bit of business sense. Right? Very interesting. Go ahead, Matt.
It's kind of separate, but Boaz's girls, is that just his servants or is that like?
Yeah, just maid servants. Women hired, or depending on what age, young. It's like Kinsey working at Baskin Robbins. Instead of working at Baskin Robbins, she's working for Boaz because Boaz needs hands to pick up wheat as they cut the wheat. Okay. All right. So here we are. We got this Torah requirement. Now we get to Boaz. Okay, sorry, I didn't want to skip. I wasn't trying to skip other question. I wasn't trying to avoid the question. All right. Yes, I personally believe that this is the one place, the Levirate marriage is the one place where even if the brother was married, he was to take his brother's widow and raise up for her a child in the name of. It's funny we're talking about this, but my brother brought up an old Christian cliche, which I will not mention. And I told him, I wouldn't say an old Christian cliche, it's like an old grandma's saying, right? And I told him where that came from in the Bible. And I told him this past weekend, y'all know he was visiting, right? I told him exactly where that came from with the story of Judah and Tamar, right? And what we find here is that it doesn't tell us, in the passage I just read in Deuteronomy, it doesn't tell, and that's why I said I personally believe, right? It does not tell us anywhere specifically whether or not the brother was married, wasn't married. If he was married, he couldn't. It doesn't. None of that is described. And in the story of Judah and Tamar, there is no evidence of the fact that Tamar continuing to be passed down to the sons of Judah, 2 sons specifically, before it gets down to the youngest, that anybody was married in that situation and circumstance. All right. But Judah was definitely married, and he definitely had children. And if you don't know the story of Judah and Tamar, yes?
Tamar was betrothed, though, which was technically adultery on both of their parts, so they both should have died. So, but Judah realized.
Whoa, Olivia. Whoa.
I mean, because according to Torah,
She wasn't betrothed.
she was promised to the youngest son, but Judah didn't.
Promised is one thing. She actually says, you haven't even given him to me for betrothal. Right? Yeah. Yep. So promised is one thing. Actual betrothal is a process. And they hadn't even gotten to the process yet. You can be promised by betrothed. And betrothed does mean promise. Don't get me wrong. Right? It's not what I'm trying to say. Betrothed means, yep, you are promised to each other. But the point is, you can have somebody saying, I'm going to give you my daughter, and they haven't even gone through the process of betrothal. So, anyways, the story goes, Judah being married, like Olivia said, regardless, we definitely know he's married, goes after a prostitute who he thought was a prostitute. It's not a prostitute. It was Tamar. It was his daughter-in-law from 2 previous sons' marriages. And he sleeps with her, leaves his stuff with her to say a sign and a symbol, goes back home, later on finds out Tamar's pregnant, brings her out in front of everybody and says, kill her, stone her, she's adulteress. And who did this? And she's basically like, the man who owns these things, sir. And he's like, oh, she's more righteous than I am, right? So that process, that whole story, by the way, Tamar births a child, and that child is also in the lineage of Yeshua specifically. That is the part of the tribe of Judah where he comes from. Yep, crazy. Crazy stories, crazy Bible stories. All right. Don't get lost, Olivia. We come back to it. We can talk about it later. We can come back to it and talk about it later. All right. And it was pre-Torah, too. But, again, when you say pre-Torah, you got to be careful, because what does that mean? Yeah, I'm not trying to say it means one thing or another. All right, so here we are. You got this situation. Somebody needs to redeem Ruth. Not really, but Boaz wants to, so he's got to make this happen. So what does he do? He goes to the closest relative, Elimelech is being offered. He goes to him and says, "Hey, listen, there's this land that's being offered for sale. It's Naomi's land. It's a lot of land, but whoever takes the land also they should follow suit with taking Ruth, the unmarried woman whose husband died, and redeem her, just like he's going to redeem the land." Because that's a part of the Torah. He doesn't say the God's law. He doesn't say that, but he's basically like, that's what you should do. Notice how he mentions the land to begin with. He mentions the land to begin with on purpose. He's trying to help himself out. He knows who Elimelech is, his already overextended, lifestyle. And I shouldn't say lifestyle. It's a bad way to put it. But he's got a lot of things to take care of, and land and another wife are not something he can add to his situation. Did I mention that? Then he said to, nope, you're right, I'm mixing it up. Then he said to the redeeming kinsman, the parcel of land which used to belong to our relative, Elimelech, is being offered for sale by Naomi, who has returned from the plain of Moab. I thought I should tell you about it and say, buy it in the presence of the people sitting here and in the presence of the leaders of my people. If you want to redeem it, redeem it. But if it is not to be redeemed, then tell me so that I can know, because there is no one else in line to redeem it, and I'm after you. Again, he said, I want to redeem it. Yeah, after you. He said, I want to redeem it. Then Boaz said, the same day you buy the field from Naomi, you must also buy Ruth, the woman from Moab, the wife of the deceased, in order to raise up in the name of the deceased an heir for his property. And the Redeemer said, then I can't redeem it for myself, because I might put my own inheritance at risk. You take my right of redemption on yourself, because I can't redeem it. I don't think they ever say his name in here, the other dudes. Right? So here we are. He's got the land. He says he wants to buy it. Then he mentions Ruth, and he's like, this might be a little bit too much, right? So again, I think Boaz was kind of getting him going, oh yeah, maybe, I don't know, it's a lot. And then when he brings up the wife and having to raise an heir to her, he's like, can't do it. It's too much.
In the story, too, that it was because, he was already married and had kids, and so by getting that land wasn't a big deal, because he would just add it to his own. But then when it came with another wife, and then he was going to have to have other heirs, then he would have to split all of the inheritance between two sets of wives and two sets of kids and stuff. That's what I was always taught, was that's why he kind of turned it back. So yeah, thinking he was already married.
Yep. Nope. I believe he probably was already married, but the point is, it was just tipping the scales. And again, I still think
too much there.
Yeah, I still think the reason he mentioned the land first was to kind of get him kind of going on the fact that it's a lot to take care of, but I want it. I do want it. Oh, and by the way, and I too agree with you too, because if we're following the Torah here. That's what they're doing right here in chapter 4. They're following Torah, right? Who's going to redeem? Who's going to raise up a child to her dead husband? Right, part of the rules. And so he says that, and he is following Torah here. And the next place, like Sarah just said, that Torah goes is you can't prefer one wife over another. So even if he was married, right, he would have to equally distribute, and that's why he says it's going to mess up my inheritance. It's going to mess up what I've already got going on for me, right? And my wife, he might as well say here that he doesn't say here, and my wife would kill me. So would my kids and everybody else, all my grandbabies, they would kill me.
I thought that there was something
I noticed that.
especially being married.
My notes say that
Like
apparently
perhaps,
scholarship is
maybe.
it's unclear how his inheritance would be messed up. But my thought is, what if he is set to inherit something different, and then when whoever dies is going to give, will him his property that he's expecting the kid, they look at him and say, oh, well, he's got Elimelech's
That's exactly.
Yeah.
So now he would be.
That's what I was saying. The
He would pass
land.
to somebody else, and he would lose his own inheritance.
That's right.
And have to give it to. Which
I believe the
wouldn't
land was.
matter, but,
Yeah, exactly. I believe the land was strategically mentioned first to get the wheels turning.
Oh, yeah.
To get the wheels turning.
Yeah.
Now we could argue too that hey, he's like I can't do it because you just said Ruth, this woman who is a part of this family who's everybody's dying and she's a Moabite, right? It could be some apprehension there, You could argue that. Nothing says that specifically. Nothing says what we're talking about earlier specifically. We just know he mentions the land first. He goes, yeah, I want that, and then he mentions, Ruth, and he's thinking about all this stuff and inheritance. There's all kinds of things we can talk about. But either way, he doesn't go with it. He says, nope, you can have it. You can have the land and you can have her. And we get to the point to where now he's got to take the sandal off. Okay? But I want to, that's why I put Deuteronomy up here along with Ruth chapter 4. They obviously, right, I don't believe they were violating Torah. Okay? They weren't violating Torah in this place. I believe they were not violating Torah. Because what he says, instead of, it's not so much that he's refusing as the only one who can fulfill Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 5 through 10. He's basically saying, all right, now the sandal's on your foot. Right? If you don't do it, you're going to be the man known who has to be known as the man who had to give up his sandal and get spit in the face and everything else. So basically, I think it was just an exchange of responsibility. This sandal was on my foot. Now you got to have it, and you better follow through, or you're gonna get spit in the face, or you're gonna be known as the man who had to give up his sandal.
Did they walk around town with one shoe?
No, he probably went to his house and got another pair of shoes.
ceremony.
Now don't get me wrong. I don't want to misrepresent though. I shouldn't say that. That's a funny question that you ask. I don't want to misrepresent that because in context, right? Remember everything that I like to talk about is in context. They didn't just have a Payless. Now, like getting shoes was a huge deal. Like it was a big ordeal. Okay.
Is there a symbolization of the shoe?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. It's a symbolic thing of him basically being like, hey, we know what the Torah says. Whoever does this has to get spit in the face in front of the elders and has to be the man known who's giving up his sandal. Go ahead.
I think it's worth mentioning the way this translation I'm looking at right now is the Net Bible. But anyway, it says, where you possess the first option to redeem it in verse 4. It's the first option that's indicating like this is a choice that you can make. You don't have to do this. And then later on down it says in verse 6. He chooses not to. He says, you may exercise my redemption option.
That's right.
So,
And then
I don't, it's pretty much the only version I've seen that renders it that way, but it's like, this is a choice we get to make, not so much you gotta do it.
the JPS does it. You take my right of redemption on yourself because I can't redeem it.
And I think you're right too about like how you said that they're not violating Torah here and stuff. They're both an option for her, and Boaz does this very purposefully in front of witnesses so that to make sure that everything is taken care of and that everything is done properly too. So I think it was very careful planning. But I mean, if neither one of them did, they were both like, nah. Then we would have had a problem, but since there were multiple options, I don't think it's any type of violation.
No, I agree. I agree. Go ahead, Miss Becky.
I looked up the significance of shoes in the ancient Middle East. Old Testament covenants are often sealed with some kind of footwear deal, and there's a good reason for this. Without shoes, we are powerless. We are humbled. We They are weak and incapable and cannot go on. A soldier cannot fight without his boots. A farmer cannot plow his field. A traveler will not get very far. I once knew of someone who was robbed penniless and forced to travel through the baking desert barefoot because they also took his shoes. The anguish he must have gone through is unthinkable. God reminds the Israelites that their clothes and their sandals never wore out as they wandered for 40 years in the desert. And this is a most remarkable and important provision. By removing a shoe in the ancient Middle East, a person can be seen to be offering vulnerability, putting themselves at the mercy of the recipient. It is a statement of trust and submission.
Yeah. Good. Good stuff. Right? And now, again, like I said, right, he takes off the shoe and gives it to the other party. This was the custom, right? It says right in the beginning that this was the custom, right? That's not what Torah tells you to do, but I believe that that's what they probably started to do in the sense of, hey, you can buy this right from me, and if you do so, here's the exchange of the shoe. Buy it for yourself, and he took off the shoe. Boaz addressed the leaders and all the people, you are witness today that I am purchasing from Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and that belonged to Kilion and Machlon, the sons. Also, I'm acquiring as my wife Ruth, the woman from Moab, the wife of Machlon, in order to raise up in the name of the deceased an heir for his property, so that the name of the deceased will not be cut off from his kinsman. Here's a really interesting part. So he goes through all this and says this. He says, may Yehovah make the woman who has come into your house, all the people at the gate and the leaders said, we are witnesses. May Yehovah make the woman who has come into your house like Rachel and like Leah, the blessing, right, over the daughters, the ancient blessing, who between them built up the house of Israel, do worthy deeds in Ephrath, become renowned in Bethlehem. May your house, because of the seed Yehovah will give you from this young woman, become like the house of Peretz, whom Tamar bore to Judah. Right? So, I thought it was interesting. I'm telling my brother this story last weekend after we get done. I didn't even know it was a part of the book of Ruth, right? And the fact that the lineage keeps coming down, but we find that the household of Tamar, her sons, right, like in that situation of that redemption, right, even though Tamar had to sneak around about it, right, and get Judah to fulfill the requirement, they're basically calling that into play as in the same way that that house was blessed, may your house be blessed. And then the most significant part of this, right, is that Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. He had sexual relations with her. Yehovah enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Then the women said to Naomi, blessed be Yehovah, who today has provided you a redeemer. May his name be renowned in Israel. May he restore your life and provide for your old age for your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons has given birth to him. Here we go again. I want to go back to my title slide. Right now, what about Ruth? All right, we got Boaz. We got the whole town. Right, we have everybody being like, this woman better than 7 sons. Blessing her, blessing her, and blessing her. As we keep going, a son has been born to Naomi and called Obed. He was the father of Yishai, the father of David. Here's the genealogy of Peretz from Tamar and Judah. Peretz was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Aminadab. Aminadab was the father of Nathan. Nathan was the father of Solomon. Solomon was the father, not Solomon, Salmon. Salmon was the father of Boaz. Boaz was the father of Obed. Obed was the father of Yishai, and Yishai was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of David. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying she. No, I don't know. I don't think so. Boaz, the father of Obed, probably not. Probably not. Maybe so. I doubt it though. Boaz was the father of Obed. Obed was the father of Jesse, and Jesse was the father of David. Boom. Here we are. 2. From there, later on throughout the years, we get to Yeshua, the Moabite, the forbidden woman. Okay? Yeah. Now what about Ruth? How about that Ruth? I should say. Strong identification piece, right? She said, and she didn't just say, she proved it by being with Ruth, like the Israelites said, better than 7 sons, staying with her, Boom. And now she is. She is of the house. All right? How do you identify? Are you identifying with stuff you should not identify with? Like the Moabites. You joke, but when my kids start acting a certain way, I start calling them Amalekites. I do. Especially since this whole identification piece come around. I'm like, get out of my house, you Amalekite. And they're looking at me like, Dad, what? I'm like, nope, you're not identifying correctly. Yeah. Nobody thought that was funny. I thought that was funny. Everybody's all serious. Oh, you really call them Amalekites?
Promise me, I got plenty of adult children living here still. They didn't listen.
Bill, you look like you wanted to say something. Did you want to say something? Yeah. No. Oh, no, okay.
I was thinking about all my sons. Got J names. Jesse, Yeshai.
Yeshai, Yared,
Yeshua,
Joshua. Cool.
Yehoshua.
Yahushua. All right. Here we are. Told you I was going to get tired. I'm tired. It's no excuse, though. Keep going. Talk about Corinthians. I wanted to show you guys something. Okay? So here in Corinthians chapter 9. Whenever you start dealing with these passages about the law, right? We dealt with them in Galatians. We deal with them in different places. Here's the place in the Corinthians where the law is seen in a negative light. Now, real important piece. I know I jumped straight from Ruth to Corinthians. Sorry. Real important piece I will reiterate about this letter, and especially in these couple passages we're going to talk about today. Right? Context, context, context. Words do matter. All right? I'm sorry. I'm not going to be, I say this all the time, I'm never going to be able to convince if the King James is good enough for Moses, it's good enough for me crowd. I'm not going to be able to convince that crowd, okay, that, listen, the word law, right, in the way it's used in the New Testament can interchangeably be used at least 20 different ways and can mean different things. This 2 verses here, though, in our passage we're reading today, I wanted to specifically highlight to show you something quite interesting. Look at verse 20. Notice, this is Paul, and I believe another thing you have to, so I say context, context, context. The fact that he's writing a letter to a group of people who wrote him a letter, we don't entirely know the specifics of the questions he's dealing with, he's answering. We don't know what they said on their end, so you got to be careful there. You got to be careful because of historical context. And you also really just have to be careful in general because words can mean a lot. And if there's one more piece, Peter tells us, warns us in his letter, Shaul's a really smart guy. He's stupid smart. That's our vernacular for today. My generation, some of you not so old people's generation, we use stuff like bad to mean cool, right? And to mean good, right? It's not necessarily a good thing. I'm not bragging about it. It's just what we do, right? So, like the Boston people would say, he's wicked smart, right? Like, that means good, by the way, to Boston people. I know it sounds bad. But he's really smart. And we take what he says, especially, like I've said in weeks past, repetitively, those of us on either side, unlearned and untaught, will take his words and twist them to our own destruction. To our bad, like, for our bad, not for our good, okay? All that to be said, all the ways that you need to read these letters and these epistles and how you need to be careful about denominationalism. Well, I took a whole leap. I was actually going to say doctrinals and things like that. But yeah, we get down to the denominational piece. Look at this. To the Jews I became as a Jew, so that I might win Jews. Right? Like I said, this is the place where he's basically being like, I become all things to all people, so that I can save, get them to be convinced. All right. I remind you, what he's talking about here, in these couple of verses, is what he did at Mars Hill. He became a philosopher to the philosophers. It doesn't mean he started worshiping their gods. He just for 1 second said, he used their gods to be like, I see you're really religious people. Don't forget, he turned around 3 sentences in and said, y'all are kind of dumb for worshiping all these gods, by the way. He confronted them. So don't think that he became them and didn't say to them, hey, it's silly that you worship things made with hands. Okay? Like they're made with hands. I'm sorry. Whoa. Who's sorry? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I am sorry. All right. So to the Jews, basically what he's saying here is to these different groups of people, when I talk to them on their level. All right? I talk to them on their level with an understanding of where they're coming from. Right? And not just in my own upbringing, in my own thought process. I have to meet people where they're at. Not be people where they're at. Meet people where they're at, okay? So to the Jews I became as a Jew so that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, though not being myself under the law, so that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, as without law, though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ, so that I might win those who are without law. Answer me this question, Sherlock Holmes. Why all of a sudden did we go from capitalizing it in one verse and not capitalizing it in the next verse? Read it. Get your New American Standard in every different version. Matter of fact, grab your King James because I think they're partially guilty also. Why would you, in one verse, capitalize it and then the next verse not? Because in one verse, you want to put your already preconceived notion / what you've been taught since you were born before you went to the printing press and got a degree and were able to edit and to print out a bunch of Bibles. And you want to put that viewpoint into verse 20, but you don't want to put that viewpoint into verse 21. Because if you do, then you're going to read, and in any way you translate it, Greek, English, or not, though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ. So what he's saying is, I am Torah, but now I am driven by, motivated by everything else, and considered righteous by the law of the Messiah. Go ahead.
Okay, NSAB 2020 updated verse 21, where it says, to those who are without law, capital L, as, and then,
So it did capitalize them?
yeah, talking about without the law. So it capitalizes when law is singular by itself to be the reference.
But doesn't,
when it says
before it's
law of Christ,
law of God?
It's talking just about the law of him. But
So
law
explain to me,
singular is-
now I just got through saying you can translate the word law, multiple, by the way, it's my last name. I keep on saying it, feels weird. Law, law. Yeah, law. It's awkward, especially when I was in the military. That's what everybody called me by. Feels like I'm talking about myself in third person, and I'm not. Anyways, explain to me why, right? You would change it one way or another when it's obviously talking about the same stuff in the same place, right? And I'll tell you why. It's because we cannot associate the Torah with the law of God, right? Like, it's unchristian to do so. The law of God's changed. It's different. I'm not mad at y'all. I was huffing because of that, but I feel like y'all have something to say. That's why I'm staring at you.
I was just looking at the different interlineary, because the actual word law, the Greek words are different. Yeah. And then I was looking at, when it's talking about in verse 20, with the notes and then the interlineary and all that, is more of the law as in the the Pharisaical customs.
That's right.
And stuff.
That's right.
And as opposed to the actual Torah. So what he's kind of saying is in 20.
No, it's perfect.
It's
perfect.
So
All goes
talking
back
about
to what you said first.
That's right.
Definition.
right.
That's right.
What is law to you?
They capitalized.
Right.
The law he's talking about.
They capitalized the wrong one. They literally capitalized the wrong one
So
because of confusion.
It's talking about more of the customs. Like if you took an oath and you cut your hair for that oath, like that was their custom. Is if y'all made that oath together, you cut your hair as a part of that. And even Paul does that in wherever. Anyway, when he's under an oath, he talks about him going to a certain city and he cuts his hair. You know, and so that's what that is talking about, is like their laws and customs in like the society.
Mishnah, Talmud.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the very thing that they should be lowercasing, they're capitalizing.
Yeah.
Because to them, right, they think Paul's saying, they don't think Paul's been woke up. They think, oh, he's a Pharisee. He's a Pharisee of Pharisees, because he does say that.
Yeah.
Right? But they don't think Paul's woke up, and they believe that in this case, Paul would capitalize these things because he considered those to be the law of God.
And when Jesus says in Matthew that I did not come to abolish the law, he's using the same Greek word in the interlineary as verse 21.
Right.
It's not the same law as in 20.
So even in the Greek,
Yeah.
even in the Greek,
In the Greek.
we have the proof and the evidence that we got a misunderstanding. We got a serious misunderstanding. Now, I will say that I think it's very significant, right, what he's saying here, and what we've talked about before in the past, right, what we talked about just last week with the circumcision piece, right? Like I said, I'm not going to stand here and do anything more than what the Council of Jerusalem did, right? Acts 15. All right, and I'm also going to sit here and I'm going to highlight, and I wish, I could just have, I wish I would have just put it where like I would have done a duplicate slide and I could have corrected it, boom, 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 where the lowercase would have swapped, right, uppercase. But without the law of God, I'm not being without the law of God is what Paul's saying. He's saying, but under the law of Christ. Meaning everything now, not changed, right, but does have to be filtered through what Yeshua did. And later on, he even gets more so into talking about, like, we'll get there. We're going to get there. We're going to get there real quick. All right. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. So this is an important piece. And I did it. Y'all saw me last week talk about chapter 8, talking about the foods offered to idols. I made the mistake. Should have realized I was making a mistake. But I talked about that whole phrase being like, Paul's not saying go eat foods offered to idols. And guess what? In chapter 10, he gets even more in detail. You can't have 8 without 10, right? He's writing this letter with a bunch of he's having Paul-versations. Right? He's having Paul-versations. He's got a lot of singular strings of thought that he's having, and he keeps going back and forth, and he's connecting them, all right? He's connecting these concepts and these ideas that he's having, okay? And in 10, specifically, he gets to the point to where, yep. Oh, yeah. This is the other part that I wanted to read. Talking about what happened in the past, right? For brothers, I don't want, this is 10 verse 1. For brothers, I don't want you to miss the significance of what happened to our fathers. All of them were guided by the pillar of cloud, and they all passed through the sea. And in connection with the cloud and with the sea, they all immersed themselves into Moshe. Also, they all ate the same food from the Spirit, and they all drank the same drink from the Spirit. For they drank from a Spirit-sent rock which followed them, and that rock was Messiah. Yet, with the majority of them, God was not pleased. So their bodies were strewn across the desert. He's saying in 40 years, lots of bodies hit the floor. Okay? Sorry. Now these, I got to stay relevant, cool to the kids. Now these things, so there's young adults out there that appreciate my reference. Yeah, I know it is. Now these things took place as prefigurative historical events, warning us not to set our hearts on evil things as they did. Don't be idolaters, as some of them were. As the Tanakh puts it, the people sat down to eat and drink and then got up to indulge in revelry. And let us not engage in sexual immorality, as some of them did, with the consequence that 23,000 died in a single day. And let us not put the Messiah to the test, as some of them did and were destroyed by snakes. And don't grumble, as some of them did and were destroyed by the destroying angel. He's getting real, he's like, look at all these places where all these people died because they were doing these things. Y'all better not do the same thing, right? These things happened to them as prefigurative historical events. Thank you, David Stern, from the complete Jewish prefigurative historical events. I'm pretty sure that's not what Paul wrote. And they were written down as a warning to us who are living in the end times. Therefore, let anyone who thinks he is standing up be careful not to fall. It is important, very important promise. No temptation has seized you beyond what people normally experience, and God can be trusted not to allow you to be tempted beyond what you can bear. On the contrary, along with the temptation, he will also provide the way out so that you will be able to endure. Very important promise. You are not being tempted past something, and it's difficult for a lot of people because they don't want to believe it. You're not being tempted past a point. You will not be allowed to, the Father will not allow you to be tempted past a point that you cannot handle. This kind of is the spiritual way of saying this law is not far from you. Don't say that it is, right? It's not hard, okay? It's the way Paul is taking all of that stuff and saying, listen, you got it within you to resist the temptation, okay? I'm not standing here, and when I get preachy, I'm not standing here in judgment. I'm standing here being like, I don't like reading that verse. I want to blame everything else. The devil made me do it, okay? That's why I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. It's not true, okay? It's not true. Therefore, my friends, run from idolatry. I speak to you as sensible people. Judge for yourselves what I'm saying. The cup of blessing over which we make barakah, or blessing, prayer, isn't it a sharing in the bloody sacrificial death of Messiah? The bread we break, isn't it sharing in the body of the Messiah? Because there is one loaf of bread, we who are many constitute one body, since we all partake of the one loaf of bread. Look at the physical Israel. Don't those who eat the sacrifices participate in the altar? So what am I saying? That food sacrificed to idols has any significance in itself? Or that an idol has significance in itself? No. What I am saying is that the things which pagans sacrifice, they sacrifice not to God, but to demons. And I don't want you to become sharers of demons. Boom. 8 thought finished in 10. Okay? Again, he's a little bit all over the place, but he gets back around to it. You can't drink both a cup of the Lord and a cup of demons. You can't partake in both a meal of the Lord and a meal of demons. Or are we trying to make the Lord jealous? We are stronger than he. We aren't stronger than he is, are we? Everything is permitted, you say. Maybe, but not everything is helpful. Everything is permitted. Maybe, but not everything is edifying. No one should be looking out for his own interest, for those of his fellow. No one should be looking out for his own interest, but for those of his fellow. Excuse me, sorry, my eyes. Eat whatever is sold in the meat market without raising questions of conscience, for the earth and everything in it belong to the Lord. If some unbeliever invites you to a meal and you want to go, eat whatever is put in front of you without raising questions of conscience. But if someone says to you, this meat was offered as a sacrifice, then don't eat it, out of consideration for the person who pointed it out, and also for conscience sake. So not only for them, but for you too, right? Don't eat it. You know now. However, I don't mean your conscience, but that of the other person. You say, why should my freedom be determined by someone else's conscience? If I participate with thankfulness, why am I criticized over something for which I myself bless God? This is him being sarcastic. Well, whatever you do, whether it's eating or drinking or anything else, do it all so as to bring glory to God. Do not be an obstacle to anyone, not Jews, not Gentiles, and not to the God's messianic community. Just as I try to please everyone in everything I do, not looking out for my own interest, but for those of the many, so that they may be saved. Try to imitate me, even as I myself try to imitate the Messiah. So they were really bent out of shape over this food from the marketplace. And you can see, right, Shaul is getting frustrated. He's like, I think he's getting to the point to where, look, he's getting to Isaiah's point. All the sacrifices don't mean anything if I ain't got your heart. What's the deal here, right? Why? And I feel like a lot of the times, this is just me personally, I feel like, why are we even talking about this? It's easy. I feel like in some of these places, not all of them, I think he kind of pauses and says, okay, now this one I understand, this one I don't get. Why are you guys so upset about it? All right. Here we go. Here we go. All right. So, he say, okay, try to imitate me even as I myself try to imitate the Messiah. Now I praise you because you have remembered everything I told you and observed the traditions just the way I passed them on to you. But I want you to understand that the head of every man is Messiah, and the head of a wife is her husband, and the head of the Messiah is God. Stop. Period. Point blank. All right. Now, the head of every man or every woman is her husband. The head of every husband is the Messiah, and the head of Messiah is God. All right. Many years ago, I got taught a message called alignment. It's the title of the message. Right? And there was nobody in the room, I don't think, that I knew of. I definitely wasn't one of them, who, when we were reading this passage, didn't say things like, oh, you got to have a covering, don't have to have a covering, women should pray with a covering, right? What I was taught, very simply, right, was that this sentence that I just read is how God's universe works. It's how his economy, his government, it works. All right? And that what that means is that alignment, right, in a household, in a family, right, is God. You could put the Trinity up there. You could put heaven, the King of glory, the Redeemer. Let's use all the names. Jehovah Jireh, right? The Son of God, right? That authority, rest comes through the man to the woman to the children, and that's the home that is in alignment. Immediate question that people would ask is, what do you do if, for whatever reason, you don't have a husband? Whatever the reason could be, even a widower. Okay? The idea and the concept that I believe is being taught right here in chapter 11 is that she still needs a covering. And that covering could very well be, right, not a husband, right, could just be the authority or the leadership, right, of a congregation. Go ahead, Olivia.
I personally think that it would be her father.
Thank you. Okay, scared me.
Biological.
You scared me. Scared me. If her biological father is still alive.
Yeah, because she,
yes.
in Numbers 30, the husband can annul the vows of a
That's right.
wife, and
Yep.
the
Nope.
father can annul the vows of
And
the
again,
daughter.
I don't even think we don't have to get real technical, right? And I don't think, as much as people make this technical, I don't think that's what's going on here. Now, different people of different stripes, including different sexes, can have a problem with what I just said. They can be like, I don't need no man. And I can understand that. I'm saying, my point is that it is very healthy, spiritually speaking, for there to be a proper alignment. And that, I believe, is what Shaul's talking about here. And he's not talking about head coverings like the one I got on. Let me ask you a question. Right now, according to some people's interpretation of Corinthians chapter 11, I better not pray.
Yeah.
You gonna stop me? I'm not trying to be ugly. I'm not trying to be mean. But do you think God is going to be mad at me if I bowed my head right now with this covering on my head and prayed? Do you think that's what Shaul's saying right here? Again, I only say that part just to kind of be common sense. I come at this like I come at so many other things. I am not sure.
Is that why so many people go with that?
Sure, but no, that could be more so. And right, again, that's why I said I was going to be cool about this. There is a symbolic respect issue that I believe is even being mentioned here. And he's actually quoting and specifically talking about things in the culture, not in Torah, mind you, everybody, not in Torah, but things in culture, he's using as an example for something spiritual. Right? For a woman to have her head shaved, to have no hair on her head, was abnormal and not okay. And he was saying that's like a woman with no covering, with no earthly authority covering, out on her own by herself, right? And in the fellowship, again, hopefully we're talking about family, Olivia, like you mentioned, right? But even if there wasn't family, just trusted male protection is the healthy thing that Shaul is talking about here. And he gets even, listen, I could read the whole thing, but he even starts dealing with something of their day that was totally opposite to that, totally against it, and that was Gnosticism. Here's another passage, right? I believe he does this in other places where we read, we've talked about this before, but where we read that I don't permit that a woman have authority or teach a man, right? The word there actually is specifically one time only used. It's authenteo. It sounds like authority, but it's not authority. It actually means something more to the specifics of being the originator of man, right? He's dealing with an idea that was very prevalent in both the Greek and Roman cultures and was even starting to creep into some forms of Judaism, and that is what is anciently known as female goddess worship. And it basically starts with this place where they actually say, so here, let me read it for you. For this, here I'm in verse 8. For man was not made from woman, but woman from man. And indeed, man was not created for the sake of woman, but woman for the sake of man. The reason a woman should show by veiling her head that she is under authority has to do with the angels. Do I know what that's talking about? No, I don't. But do I understand the words before that, right? Do I understand that we're talking about the fact that he's got to clear the record every other letter he sends out to these different groups of people who were pagans? Yeah, I get it. He's basically saying, listen, there's a natural order of the way things should be. It's the better way to do things. It's the better way to walk through life to have this natural order. And so much so, right, that this is where I get to the point to where I'm talking about unauthorized coverings. Okay, what happens in a family? I got pictures drawn in 2007. 2003, right? I was copying the slideshow from this teaching, and it showed what happens when a man decides not to be the covering, right? Because you could easily be like, well, when the woman decides she don't want to be covered, she's out there all by herself and she's going to get all jacked up, right? Because the way we drew it on the PowerPoint, right, it was like literally a covering, right? Huh? An umbrella, like a protection piece, right? And you could easily be like, well, what happens if the kids get out from underneath that covering? Everybody in this house, don't tell me you don't know. I know exactly what happens when the children get out from underneath that covering. Right? When they rebel. I know what happened to me when I got out from underneath that covering. That's a whole nother story. Right? Because the covering, the alignment, it can be totally jacked up. You keep drawing pictures, husband, wife, children, right? And you can get all kinds of stuff, including the husband not being there and not being a part of that. What do you do then? Okay? That's hard. That's really hard. Good. Right? And now here's another question. Whoa. Here's another question. Why does it say that it's if the Messiah is the head of the man? Why does it say that a man is shaming himself if he prays covered? Where does it say?
If he prays covered.
Mm-hmm. For man indeed should not have his head veiled, because he is the image of the glory of God, and the woman is the glory of man.
And that's what people take it to think that it's something physical.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. I asked that question, right?
Because
If we're talking about, but hold on.
Otherwise you'd have to be bald.
Are you ready? Let's look. Well, hold on. Right here. The man indeed.
any man who prays
Yeah, 7.
prophesies with his head covered
Verse 7.
raises his head.
Listen, anyone I've known those who I believe pure in heart have read this passage and felt like, as a symbol, going back to that verse that I just read about the covering, the veil is for the angels and not for, that I said I don't know what that's talking about. I've known many people, especially in the Messianic movement, who have chosen to wear head coverings as females as a symbol of the authority, the fact that they're married, right? That this is the authority. This is the me making the statement. I am in alignment with my husband, right? Like they're going off of this passage here a lot of times when they do that. I am not insulting anyone for that. I'm saying I believed a long time ago and still do. I'm not saying I don't have room for correction or some other thought, right? But that this is not talking about short hair, long hair, right? The idea of what short hair was to the biblical Judeans at this point in time versus even what it meant to Romans was completely different, right? What long hair was different then. Now, I will say this, long hair, right? Once you get down to the point where, it's past the middle of your back, that's what Paul's talking about. During this point in time, that was shameful for a man to have. We weren't supposed to have that kind of hair. We talked about Samson last week, or 2 weeks ago, right? How long was Samson's hair, right? Never cut it in his whole entire life, right? So again, we're talking about a cultural picture, not like a Torah issue. I'm saying this is speaking about, look here in what I have particularly highlighted in 10. Notice what's in, remember what I said about the parentheses? Notice what's in italics. Therefore, the woman ought to have authority on her head because of the angels. So the weird verse, that a symbol of was added by the translators. They think or believe, context leads them to believe that's the idea or the concept. So even in the weird verse, right, it's still talking, in my opinion, about an issue of government and authority in life and the living out of your daily life, which we all know, no matter how much you try to follow Torah, Yeshua's teachings, Shaul's teachings, it can get way uglier than black and white and way muddier and way more difficult, and we're not to necessarily take some kind of like mathematical stance in any of these situations without having some heart and some real godly wisdom involved. But I do believe there is something spiritual to this concept of the authority piece. It does not mean that a man is to lord over his wife. That is not what I'm saying. That is not the point. Yes, am I saying in a measurement that there is a head of... I am. Hate me if you want to. Don't hate me. I don't want anybody to hate me. I like everybody to like me. Right? I am talking about a proper alignment inside the home. What that looks like, I believe, is a spiritual, Holy Spirit thing. It's a Torah thing, Spirit and truth, right? Now, go back to my question. Why does it say that a man who prays with his head veiled, right, is ashamed? And let me ask you this. Do we know historically that whether or not the rabbis, the Pharisees during this time, the Sadducees, Shaul himself, do we know historically for a fact that when they prayed, they covered their head?
Who was it that was given a turban before going into, before he went to the temple, was he given a turban?
I think so.
I don't know if he prayed.
I think so.
He definitely, there were head coverings.
Yeah, definitely head coverings, and men wore head coverings, and men wore head coverings for different customary reasons, even spiritual customary reasons. So again, I think that what Shaul is saying here is he is specifically talking about if a man is, here's where the unauthorized coverings come from. By the way, it was the very first teaching I ever heard as I became quickly a part of the Hebrew Roots Messianic movement. And it's called, Who is Your Unauthorized Covering? Right? And I learned very quickly what Pharisee meant and what that was about. And the traditions and custom of men making the word of God of none effect. Okay? Very fast. It was like almost instantaneous. Right? So who is your unauthorized covering? Right? Is the concept and the idea is a man who prays, right, in his home without that authority of like there's nobody between him and Yeshua. That man is praying in some manner or way, again, words and how you want to translate it, shamefully. That man should, when he's praying, not pray thinking it's got to go through Saint so-and-so. Or it's got to go through Paul. Or it's got to go through, you name it, right? Pastor Bob. That's right. Now, ask yourself the question, does that mean that a woman can't pray unless she's praying through her husband? No. The idea and the concept is that when she prays, she is praying as a part of that alignment piece and a part of that home, not on some separate plane or some separate field, unless she absolutely has to. Father, pull my husband underneath your covering, because he ain't. My wife has had to pray that prayer a bunch of times. Even in some believing times, she's had to pray that prayer. And not weird woman way, right? Really, truly needed to pray that prayer. No, you're not a weird woman. Like, there's weird women out there. Weird church, I should say it like this. Weird church women way, right? And everybody in this room knows exactly what I'm talking about when I say that. Right? She had justification to be like, pull my husband back underneath this shade of your tree. Now. Okay? So, I don't want to be out of alignment. So the key is, I'm recognizing I need to lead my family underneath the covering of Yeshua, who is underneath the covering of God the Father. It's that simple. Anything else that this might be saying, I'm willing to entertain. But I think it's definitely saying that, even if it is talking about some traditional customs and things that are good reminders of that. All right. Can I go on to talking about how not to eat the Lord's Supper real fast? What time is it?
Fast.
4:59. It's 4:59.
It is 5. Whoa. Boy. I am tired. No, it's really, truly, to be honest with you, we can quickly talk about it. The bread and the wine. We actually had this conversation a couple weeks ago between myself, Jared, and Bill. And the key piece here, I think there was more, definitely some, I wouldn't say more, shouldn't say that, like I'm comparing. There was some weird things going on here, right, in this passage. And I think it's multiple pieces. One, they definitely weren't keeping separate the meal and mealtime versus the sanctity of the bread and the wine as representation. Remember what I said about the strings of thought? Remember how I read in 10 where he started talking about the bloody sacrifice, that's what the cup is for, the body. Like, we do this for a purpose and a reason and a remembrance. Again, here, he does the same thing, but I also believe he's talking about some other stuff. I believe that there was some issue with poverty, the way that they were eating in general together. They were doing it in some kind of a manner and a way beyond not separating the Lord's Supper. They were doing it in some manner, some way where, like, one person would be totally full and somebody would be without, right? Like, one person would be drunk already and another person wouldn't have anything to eat. So, like, there was some out of alignment in even the way that they were fellowshipping with food. So we don't want to be there. And we definitely want to make sure, and we talked about this, right, in the situation and circumstance where we're in, right, we don't have a separate, necessarily a separate eating place, right, but we definitely want to, whether we do this as a part of the video or whether we do it as a part of, hey, right before we start service, we want to keep separate from filling your gourded, what's the word I'm looking at, not gourded, filling your faces with food and snacks and sweets. We want to keep that separate and obviously separate from this remembering what Yeshua did. Paul cites and specifically says, right, he says, he goes and repeats in verse 23, "For what I received from the Lord is just what I passed on to you, that the Lord Yeshua, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and after he had made the blessing, he broke it and said, 'This is my body, which is for you. Do this in memorial to me.' Likewise, also the cup after the meal, saying, 'This is the cup of the new covenant affected by my blood. Do this as often as you drink it as a memorial to me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the death of the Lord until he comes.'" So you proclaim the death of the Lord until he comes. Then he goes on to say, examine yourself before you take it. So listen, whether we're taking it like 5 minutes after, the meal, and we say a blessing, and it's up there on the same place where the food's at, but we're still keeping it separate. We all agreed to that. Or we got it up here, and we're doing it as a part of the service. Remember, the very first time we did this, right, because we had little children, and it was cute. I wouldn't say the very first time, but it was like 2 or 3 times into us first having the bread and the wine up here on a table when we had a lot more space. And right, and we were all laughing and joking and cutting up. I was like 3 times in, right, that I was like, hey, hold up, young people. Right, I had to make a proclamation to be like, listen, stop joking, stop cutting up. This is that moment where we remember his death, right? And he says later, like I said, examine yourselves. I believe it's a moment where you are literally supposed to be, thank you. And I like the fact that we do it from week to week so that I don't have a long list of thank you for doing this for me and for the sins I committed this week. Right? I don't like waiting until the first Sunday of every, it'll be way too, no, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry, I'm not that bad. Make myself out to be such a horrible person. No. I still think the list might be too long, right? I got angry, right? You guys get it. The idea is you're supposed to examine yourself before you even take. And because you don't examine yourself and because you don't see it as what it's supposed to be, he says this is why many of you are weak and dying. Like, he was like, look, you're bringing a curse on yourself. Right? And I hate to use that word because it can mean so much kind of crazy, weird stuff, right? But literally that's what he's saying. He's saying you are doing something that's hurting you just by the way you're taking the bread and the wine. Okay? So I reiterate to all of us that when you do it and you partake, when we say the blessing, think about it. Think about it hard. Examine. Guarantee you that's a special Greek word. Like diligent, we talked about last week. Guarantee you. Examine yourselves. Okay? Don't take it lightly, young people. Right? It's not just something we do. It is something we remember. Intentionally and purposefully for your own good. All right? And like I said, I was always taught, hey, when you take that bread and you break it and you dip it in the blood, by his stripes we were healed. He was bruised and wounded for our iniquities. And the chastisement of our peace. Right? What happened? Did you turn me up?
Yeah, I put the wrong one.
The chastisement of our peace was upon him. Okay? Think about that. Maybe we should start saying that verse. Before Isaiah. All right.
So yeah, let's close this service with the Aaronic blessing.
Berekeka Yehovah ve'yishmereka Ya'er Yehovah panav leka ve'kuneka Yesa Yehovah panav leka ve'yasem leka Shalom. May Yehovah bless you and keep you. May Yehovah make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yehovah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. In the name of the Prince of all peace, Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Even so, come quickly, Yeshua HaMashiach.
Shabbat Shalom.